Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Movie Film Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about movies. Movie Film Podcast on the radio.
Welcome to Movie Film. It's episode 291, brought to you by Mr. Boy Productions. I'm Zachy. He's Brian.
Hey ho there, Zachy.
What's up?
I have to say I'm feeling a lot better than the last record.
You sound better.
Yeah, thank you. How about yourself? You were under the weather as well.
Doing all right. You know, there's been some stuff going around. I think I've said before, the problem in my household is once one person gets sick, it travels up the chain and then back down the chain and just caroms hither and thither. And so that's what I've been doing my best to dodge, but it could be worse.
Okay, well, good. Yeah. That when we recorded last, that was the day I woke up with it, and my throat was on fire, and I had like cough drops in my mouth, just trying to make sure that I took an Advil, and I could tell that I was like several degrees removed. Like, oh yeah, hey man, So,
I don't know, man. You had kind of a throaty Jessica Rabbit thing going on.
Oh, well, I'll take that. But yeah, no, I feel much better today. I have a little bit of a cough that I'll probably try to mute out, but yeah, happy to be in better spirits with you.
Well, tell me about Conan Must Go.
Conan O'Brien Must Go. So we've spoken at length about how Conan O'Brien has been a real comedic touchstone for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's The Simpsons, of course, but there was also Late Night with Conan O'Brien. And some of the funniest things he'd do on his shows over the years was he would head out of his studio and he would interact with people. And eventually got to the point where he'd have entire specials where he'd travel to another country and explore and get to know the culture and try out popular sports or dances and interact with the locals, all while, of course, acting like a total goofball. And these were a lot of fun to watch because he was always genuinely curious about the country he was visiting and everyone who lived there. And it would always lead to these funny situations where he'd make a fool of himself and endear everyone to him. And in the end, these shows would become a sort of sweet and interesting document about various countries around the world. So now that Conan has wrapped up his late night show at TBS, HBO has stepped in and given him a platform with this show so he can continue going on the same kinds of trips where he gets to explore different countries and have fun riffing with the locals, highlighting what makes, all these places fun and unique. Have you watched any of the previous Conan travel shows before?
Oh, absolutely. Anytime he does something remote, doesn't have to be international. Anytime he would go outside the studio and just sort of mingle with the folks.
See, and that's what it was. He was always doing that all the way back to Late Night. But It felt like then they became bigger and bigger. And now it's, there's a cultural exploration going on as well, which is a lot of fun. I feel it's respectful, but he always does find the way. He always makes himself the fool.
Right.
You know what I mean? So the people at the country can kind of laugh at him. Actually, there was a moment that made me laugh really hard where he's in Argentina and he's talking with someone to learn just body language and the way that he can try to blend in and not accidentally offend anyone and while he's over there. And this woman tells him that when you are exiting an interaction with someone, you kiss them on the cheek goodbye. And he's like, anyone? Like even someone that I'm not that familiar with? And she's like, yes. He's like, okay. So he's like, well, thank you. And he kisses her on the cheek. And he's in this restaurant. And then he looks at the table next to him. He's like, okay, well, I'm leaving. And then he kisses this guy on the cheek. And then he kisses this woman on the cheek. And then he goes to every single table in the restaurant and just kisses everyone on the cheek. Like, well, bye. I'm leaving. Bye. Like and it goes on and on and on. And everyone is like cracking up. It's just joyful and funny like that. But something that's kind of interesting that feels different from this versus when he would do this on TBS is this doesn't have a laugh track.
Oh, right. Because he would be playing the videos in front of the audience.
Exactly.
Oh.
And I did find that it was missing a little something without it because it almost felt like the equivalent of when you're watching the rough cut of a film without the final music sort of cinching it together in a weird sort of magical way.
Yeah.
It's still funny, but it felt a little, he'll do something but there's no punctuation that you're used to seeing with these sorts of things on his shows. So things just sort of hang there, and it's almost up to you if you find it funny or not. And then it cuts to the next thing.
Right, right.
I didn't realize what how magical that component was before with these sorts of things.
That's
But all that said, though, I mean, doing this with HBO, he's got the budget, way up, and it shows. And he even makes a whole thing about the drone. He's so excited about this drone that they're working with. And there's like a scene where he and the drone are walking down a path together side by side, and like it's hilarious. I think if for fans of Conan and especially of his travel comedy, I think it's definitely worth.
So this is on HBO Max.
Max, isn't it? Just Max, the one to watch for HBO.
Whatever. Yeah. That's that.
What's HBO Max, Zachy? Yeah, but no, I think this is really perfect for when you're like, okay, I don't want to start up a movie. Like, this is like 40 minutes. I could just get to giggle for 40 minutes here before I go to bed. That's kind of how I did it, and it was perfect.
Speaking of Max, you see how they're now offering, it's going to be bundled with Hulu and Disney Plus, and
I did, yeah.
Which I'm like, so we went on this whole journey just to end up back at cable.
I know, I can't even say I entirely understand it, because those are different companies.
Yeah.
How does that even? Who am I paying? Like, you know what I mean? So it's just one big mega app. I don't get it.
But, I mean, that's what we're seeing now. Is all these streaming apps are bundling together.
Look, who's laughing last? I'm gonna get it. So,
yeah, because I just saw this. It's so you have the Disney Plus, Hulu, and Max bundle, and that's going to be whatever, like 15, 20, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got, I mean, it's like all the second tier things realizing, we can't compete on our own, right?
Yeah, right.
Because I mean, how many services do you subscribe to?
Literally, that's a good question.
Like, actually, you're paying out of pocket.
I probably the major ones. I mean, HBO, Disney, Apple, Hulu. I think. Well, Hulu's with Disney, right? No.
Yeah, so I'm willing to bet that you are outside the norm for most people.
Oh, having all those?
Yeah.
Actually, that's a good question. Because I feel like a grandpa, even when I let slip on this show. I'm like, I was flipping channels and I caught this. And I wonder if people are like, flipping channels.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about that because my daughter, she watches, whatever, all of her shit that she watches. And she'll be like, this is on Disney Plus. And she watches that. This is on Netflix. She watches that. I was like, she has no concept of channel surfing.
Yeah. So that leads me to wonder, then what are people watching? I mean, don't they have these apps, or do they just have Netflix? Do they have five apps? Do they have just Netflix and that's the monolith that everybody's watching?
I think Netflix is the monolith.
Yeah.
And I think other stuff, it's just, I think we take for granted that we sort of have access to a lot of streaming sites. And I'm willing to bet most people don't. And they're just like, whatever. Fallout is on Amazon Prime. Well, I don't have Amazon Prime, so I'm just never going to watch that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Or Peacock is sort of like that, right? Where I don't know a lot of people that have Peacock. I will say, actually, I do have Amazon Prime. I forgot about that. And I was very annoyed. I was telling you off air, I won't get super into it, but a little bit of fraud happened with my Amazon account that was very frustrating. And so now I'm questioning every, thing that shows up on my credit card statement. And I saw this $2.99 charge from Amazon. And I was like, what the hell is this? I just got all mad. I'm already in the thick of it. And I look, and it's that stupid paying to not have advertisements thing that I probably signed up for like 2 months ago or something. And I was like, I don't know. It's just like the gall. You know what I mean? Like, I'm already paying like, who knows what, like $115 a year or something. And even $2.99 a month for the dignity of not having ads during your stupid shows. Like, I don't know, man.
Brian, here's what I want right now. I want you to take me back to a simpler time when shows were aired on network television.
Yeah. It's so funny because at the same time, I am very thankful that we do have so many shows that are on the caliber of like motion pictures. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
they're feature films. Like why do I say motion pictures? Like I'm like mayor, in the 20s or something. Pictures, but
The pictures.
I appreciate, and not to say that there weren't amazing shows back in the 80s, 90s, whatever, but I am also, I appreciate the budgets that many shows have now and what we're able to get these days. So that is pretty cool and special. But yeah, it's just sort of like I don't know, maybe like it's a Wild West, I think, of companies trying to figure out how they can make money as technology evolves. And at some point, it's just going to change every 3 years and we'll be the victims of having to keep up with it and pay more and more.
Well, I've been prognosticating that this day was coming for the better part of 10 years.
Zachradamus, Notre-Dame.
That's me. I've been the Cassandra, just trying to warn. Look, this streaming revolution, it's not going to last, and here we are. But with that in mind, I know you watched something else which harkens back to a simpler era.
I was going to say, speaking of network television, you had recommended to me, because I am, being the Terminator fan that I am, you said, well, Brian, there is a blind spot you have in the Terminator content you consume, which is Terminator: The Sarah Connor Chronicles, which aired in 2008 and 9 on Fox Network. And so I had mentioned already that I had started it, but in my sort of sick haze the past couple of days, I finally was able to really binge it and finish it. And I am happy to say that I'm very glad that I did.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what it is lately. I've just really been jonesing for Terminator stories. I mentioned a couple times I started reading a couple of the books that came out post the movies, and this show definitely scratched that itch in a good way. I think it fluctuates, and I know there was a writer's strike happening while this was in production, and
yeah.
I would say it can occasionally be a bit of a mixed bag. There are a couple filler episodes, and some of them feel very old school TV tropey style stories where it's like, right, we need to go undercover at a military academy. I'll pose as a student, and the adult figure will, by some insane stretch of the imagination, be an instructor for the week. I don't know why this academy would go along with that when no one knows who you are, but you get to be an instructor and be with kids who are, carrying weapons. But all that said, it also had some really, really great characters, especially the cyborgs. I mean, Cameron, played by Summer Glau, through the whole series was fascinating. Her story, and when you even sort of get into her origins, are really interesting. And there's a character that appears at some point named John Henry. He's really fascinating, played by a really great actor. I can't remember his name, but just really interesting stuff. And they had some really clever ideas too with Terminator concepts, like a Terminator that was sent back too early. Like he arrives too early and he looks up at the stars and realizes the stars aren't where they should be. And
Garrett Dillahunt, by the way.
He's fantastic.
He was Cromartie also.
Cromartie, right. So yeah, it's some really fun concepts. So he basically has to hibernate, and they figure out that he's hibernating somewhere in Los Angeles, because he's set to assassinate someone. They have to get to him first, and he's hidden in a wall somewhere. It's just clever stuff.
Right.
So like I said, there was some of it that I played just okay for me, and other episodes I was like, well, that's great, let's get to the next one. But when all was said and done, and I did the last episode, I was like, oh, like I had this little pang of sadness. Like, it's over. The trip is done.
It's a shame because it does end on a cliffhanger.
Yes.
But I think that the stuff that they did, first of all, Brian Austin Green as Derek Reese.
Yes.
This is, the first time I saw him in this show, I was like, no, this guy's like, he's not, that douchebag from 90210. He's like really good in this.
Isn't it? I thought about that very specifically, actually. In my mind, I think of him as kind of a goober.
Yeah.
Strictly because of his character from 90210 30 years ago. That's so unfair. I feel really bad about that.
Right.
But yeah, no, he's great in this. I think everyone was definitely had strong moments. I think it's a pretty good. One of the things I didn't like about the book that I read
Mhm.
was I thought the characterization of Sarah and John, and especially their interactions with one another, were just not good. It was just really bad.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed their interactions in this show. And I thought John Connor, as a character, he was done justice, I thought.
No, the kid who plays him is great. Thomas Dekker. I thought he was really good.
Yeah. And I mean, he's brooding, but not in an obnoxious way, in an understandable way. He's a loner. I mean, he has to be a loner.
It's interesting because it's a very different characterization than like Nick Stahl, for example.
Yes.
But it's also different from Eddie Furlong. Like he kind of did his own thing.
Totally.
Right?
And you get into that sort of loneliness. I mean, there's sort of because it's a TV show and you need him to be interacting with people. They put him in high school, which in real life you doubt they would probably.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Real life. I'm laughing at myself for saying real life, but he needs to meet people. And I thought he did a good job of wanting to try to sort of make friends, but just by virtue of who he is and that he is constantly being hunted, he just cannot. And so he's eternally lonely and kind of sad. And his only friend is this cyborg, Cameron. And even that's kind of complicated.
Mm-hmm.
So they set up like a lot of really fun ideas in that show. And aside, like I said, from a couple sort of stock feeling stories, I thought it was really good. So I think for fans of the Terminator films who have not checked this out yet, I definitely think it's worth checking out. Which, by the way, speaking of streamers, I watched on Hulu. So,
there's I don't remember which episode it is, but the one where it's with Dr. Silberman.
Yes.
Right, and it's not Earl Bone. It's Bruce Davison.
Yep.
But I really liked that as a progression of his character.
Yes. Yeah. After what he has experienced in Terminator 2 in that hallway, it's changed him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the show was created by Josh Friedman, and it tells you something that James Cameron brought him into the Terminator writer's room he put together.
Yeah.
For in the Dark Fate, which was meant to spawn a whole other thing. But I mean, to me, it was like recognition. No, this guy knows what he's doing.
Totally. And I think it is, like I said, it's not perfect. It has its flaws, but it is bursting with great ideas, story-wise and character-wise. And it actually made me a little sad that it was kind of ahead of its time in a way. I mean, I feel like if it had come out in the past couple years and didn't feel like it had to have 22 episodes a season, give it 10 episodes a season, 4 or 5 seasons, and you could have had a really strong, focused Terminator story.
Oh, for sure. Well, no, but I've said this to you before. Look, right now we have 3 distinct here's what happened after Terminator 2 options. And in my opinion, the series is the best one of those 3.
I agree. I agree. And Shirley Manson, by the way, from Garbage.
Mm-hmm.
I will say when she was introduced, she starts out a little rough.
Right.
And then she totally settles into her character. And it becomes a very interesting idea.
Yeah.
What she's doing. I don't know. Her whole machinations are pretty fascinating. And just the whole thing with her and her daughter and just good stuff. A lot of great ideas.
I agree. I hope people will check it out.
Yeah. So thank you for turning me on to that.
I'm glad that landed for you. While we're talking about kind of dipping into the archives, I should mention I ended up rewatching Lost in Space.
The film?
The movie Lost in Space, not the television show.
I have never seen it.
You've never seen it? Like never?
No. And it's funny. I had actually wondered, I've said many times, I like catching up on these old 90s films I've never seen because I just love the aesthetic of 90s films.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if that's something that is worth me checking out. So I'm very curious to hear what
I don't know.
Oh, no.
It's weird. I mean, I think it is so of its. I mean, it is so March of 1998. You know,
Sure.
it's so like I remember that was another one of those very similar to Godzilla that same year where it was like a hype campaign, and oh, we'll get to the movie when we get to it kind of thing. You know,
Hmm.
like they already had their wagon hitched to, oh, we're gonna make a trilogy, and we got the the toys and everything else, and it's like, well, the movie's just kind of okay, but it got shit on hard like when it came out by critics. Like Siskel and Ebert picked it as one of their worst of the year, and this whole thing,
Oh.
and you watch it now, and it's like it feels very quaint,
Hmm.
So like to me, that's what's sort of fascinating because at the time it was like, oh, we're updating the old kitschy TV show,
Hmm.
which was about 30 years old at that time, and now the movie is almost 30 years old.
Wow.
So in its own way, it's just as kitschy but differently.
Yeah. And Matt LeBlanc.
Matt LeBlanc was in
Is
it. He was a last minute. He was a ringer for uh, what's his name, Young Indiana Jones, Sean Patrick Flannery.
interesting.
Yeah, they had cast him originally, but I think he was supposed to like square off with William Hurt, and I think it was just the size differential was such that you didn't get the sense that they were on equal footing.
Okay.
But definitely having William Hurt in there was interesting because up until then he had not really done those type of movies, like franchisee type things.
Sure. Yeah. He's doing all
Uh,
his like accidental tourist,
exactly,
big
right. So
chill kind of
and then
movies. Yeah.
and then I mean, Lost in Space just uncorked for the rest of his career. He was just doing franchisee type stuff. But it's not good. I mean, right? I'm not. It's not good, but it is interesting in its own way, just as sort of an artifact of its time.
Okay. I
Yeah.
I haven't been dissuaded for what that's worth.
I mean, Gary Oldman is in there. Jared Harris is in there. Mimi Rogers. I mean, you got Heather Graham. Um, like pretty decent cast for a movie like
yeah.
that. You know?
Yeah, I think it's almost like I want those vibes, if that makes any sense, like 90s
Yeah.
sci-fi, and you saying quaint and like understanding that I'm not, dusting off some old gem or something.
Right. Let me put this way. I don't think you'll regret watching it. You're not. It's not going to change your life, but I don't
Right.
think you'll regret watching it. I think it has a great score, by the way. Bruce Broughton, who did Tombstone,
Oh, okay.
and like I said, Jared Harris. This is pre Mad Men and all this
Mhm.
other stuff, so it's weird to see him as kind of just like a kid.
Oh, weird. Yeah, I can't even picture it. He's always been
Yeah.
older in my mind. Wait, I have a question for you then. So for Siskel and Ebert to go out of their way to even
Yeah.
mention it again, not just to forget about it, but to
Yeah.
mention it again at the end of the year as one of the year's worst. I
Yeah.
mean, why do you feel that is?
I don't know actually. It's such an entirely adequate movie.
Right.
Like it's just doing what it does. I mean, Ebert gave it 1.5 stars.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, but I mean, here's Ebert's. Here's the start of his of Ebert's review. He says, "Lost in Space is a dim-witted shoot 'em up based on the old, I hesitate to say, classic TV series. It's got cheesy special effects, a muddy visual look, and characters who say obvious things in obvious ways. If it outgrosses the brilliant Dark City, the previous sci-fi film from the same studio, then audiences must have lost their will to be entertained."
Okay. It's some perspective there. I see.
There you go.
Sure.
Here's how he closes the review, by the way. He says, "Of the performances, what can be said except that William Hurt, Gary Oldman, and Mimi Rogers deserve medals for remaining standing. This is the kind of movie that if it fell into a black hole, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference."
Okay. All
Which,
right.
I got to be honest, he's not entirely wrong in terms of anything he says.
Yeah.
And yet, I would say I was like, that was fun to revisit.
Yeah. I guess I'm trying to understand why he was so offended by it.
I think definitely the Dark City of it all.
Yeah.
Right. Which, for those of you who don't know, Dark City was a movie that Ebert championed, which also starred William Hurt, by the way, and he was understandably, peaked over how it didn't particularly perform at the
Right.
box office.
Right. Okay. No, that makes sense. Wait. So what inspired that?
Well, my son and his random voodoo list of movies he's curated. Lost in Space happened to be one of them. I happened to sit down and watch, a decent chunk of it with him, and it took me back. I mean, it took me back to when I watched it in the theater.
Now, did he have any context for this? Because obviously there's the 60s show, but there's also the Netflix series from a couple
Yeah.
years back. So
Well, he definitely has not seen the Netflix show. I think I think his list is just him going through my voodoo, which is voluminous,
Mhm.
and just adding random things to his list. Some stuff he's like, he just watched Dragonheart the other day.
Wow. Is that the Sean Connery?
That
thing?
is the Sean Connery one. Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know what he thought of that, but I was looking at the effects there, and I was like, man, I remember when people were like, man, the dragon in Dragonheart, that's like the next leap in CGI. And you look at it now, and you're like, well, it's a it's a hop. I don't know if it's a leap.
Actually, I had that feeling watching Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes last night. If you could take someone from 1920 or something and then show them this movie, if they'd be like, my God, what have you done?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, seriously. So anyway, Lost in Space is very funny because that was the film that dethroned Titanic from the box office.
Oh, that's right. I remember that as a little bit of trivia.
Right, so that's the one claim to fame that it's like Chuck Wepner. His one claim to fame. He was the first guy to knock down Muhammad Ali.
Right.
Ali got up and kicked his ass, but he got knocked down. That's Lost in Space.
That's funny. And another point of trivia: the old '60s TV show, the main theme was done by John Williams.
John Williams. That's right.
Yeah,
he did the themes for all of those old Irwin Allen shows.
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
Yeah, famously, Gene Roddenberry told this story about how he met with the various networks while he was pitching Star Trek, and he met with CBS, and they were like asking him all these very specific questions, like, how would you do this? Like, if you have characters who are on another planet, how would you depict that? And like real at length, and then they ended up passing on the show, but they greenlit Lost in Space, and he went to his grave convinced that they basically, picked clean like his ideas.
Wow.
For which, I mean, I would say Star Trek is a better show. Star Trek did all right in the long run, but still, point of trivia.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Wait. What did he think? Your son?
Well, he gave it a shrug, which I don't know if that. I'm still trying to decipher the shrug.
I mean, that's not a. Well, that sucked.
I don't think it was that. I mean, I think it's like totally. Again, it's like it's fine, it will not change your life, but there's worse ways to spend a couple hours, and at least if nothing else for me, I mean, it definitely takes me back to that era,
Yeah. Okay, very cool.
But hey, why don't we take a short break because we have kind of a bumper crop of listener letters I wanted to get through. Okay, here we go. Well, hey, we've had a bunch of letters piling up, and this kind of works out because the theme running through all these is Planet of the Apes, and what's more appropriate than that, Brian?
Nothing.
Nothing. So this is from James Garcia, who emailed us. He says, I think I've written to the show before, or at least interacted with Zachy on social media, but I just wanted to drop a quick note to reiterate my love for your movie commentary tracks. Several of them have now become yearly staples like Die Hard around Christmas or The Fugitive every St. Patrick's Day.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Wow.
I love that. That's amazing. I work from home and spend a lot of time alone. However, whenever I feel particularly down or lonely, I'll think, how about I just hang out with Zachy and Brian? And I'll pop on a commentary of yours for a movie I've seen. It really helps fill the silence, and your camaraderie truly makes it feel like I'm just hanging out, watching movies with a couple of friends. I started a Spotify playlist called Favorite Commentaries, thinking I'd throw a couple on there to have on standby. Before I knew it, the playlist had over 30 tracks on it.
Oh man, I gotta say that's kind of nice to hear.
Wow, that's amazing. He says, I recently went through your Planet of the Apes commentaries and found them absolutely fascinating. I so appreciate all of the production history and background knowledge that Zachy brings to each track. I liked but never really got the 1968 film until listening to your commentary, and now I see the film in a completely different light. I've now started diving into all the sequels in anticipation of the new movie. I'm already a big fan of the last trilogy. He then asked if we were going to do a track for Escape from the Planet of the Apes, which, hey, wouldn't you know it, we just dropped 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So his letter arrived just in time. Well, thank you for that. Anytime I can talk at Brian about Planet of the Apes, I consider that a win. I put that in my good deeds for the day.
Honestly, I mean, that's my favorite thing, right? I that is your area of expertise, and I enjoy hearing about movies and movie making, and I want you to impart all that stuff that's dancing around in your head on me. That's I get the benefit too of getting to hear you talk through those films.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Here's a note we got from Alex Naom, who says, "G'day, gents. On this beautiful morning on Sunday, May 5th, I thoroughly enjoyed listening to your latest Apes commentary. I've lived most of my life hearing that all of the 4 sequels to the 1968 classic were mostly trash, so I have never made the time to watch them. In the 2 years I've been an avid and at times cult-like follower of your channel, my interest has slowly gained. The Escape commentary has sealed the deal, and now I will seek them out if it's the last thing I do. Damn it. I shall report back with my findings in due time." This weekend, for some reason, my local cinema was playing all of the Star Wars films in a row. Isn't that strange? Anyway, I took this serendipitous moment to cross off my bucket list seeing the original Star Wars trilogy in cinemas. It was either the 04 DVD version or the 2012 Blu-ray version. I forget which version first introduced the rocks covering R2-D2 in A New Hope, but Hayden Christensen made an appearance at the end of Jedi. So the rocks, that was in the Blu-ray, I think.
Okay, yeah.
The rocks covering. It's like this extra, in A New Hope when he's hiding from Obi-Wan. R2.
Yeah.
And there's these rocks, which now you're like, well, how did he get behind there?
It makes no earthly sense. But
yeah, I think that was 2012.
Yeah.
Alex continues, "It was a magical experience, and it was nice watching the film with the same crowd of 60 to 80 people who were also were there for all 3. Watching them on the big screen really brought to the fore the different tones of each film. You could tell they had a bigger budget with each subsequent film, and unlike Planet of the Apes, by the way. And there's definitely more snap, crackle, and pop to the pacing of Empire and Jedi. However, I enjoyed in A New Hope how Lucas pores over the details of the world in the Jawa transporter, and Mos Eisley in particular. You can tell how much he loves those small details, and he's at his best as a filmmaker when he revels in those details without getting bogged down in plot mechanics. Thinking back on what you've mentioned in your show, was it the 1997 special edition release when both of you first saw these films on the big screen? Thank you for all you do in this community and keep up the great work. Warmest regards from the most crazed of all your followers, Alex." Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you, Alex.
It was at least for me, it was the special editions.
Same. Yeah, no, I mean I'll never forget seeing the trailer for those special editions in the theater, and it started with a television. You remember this? The whole screen was black, and there was a really small television at the center of the screen, and it was like, for an entire generation, this was the only way to see Star Wars. And you see an X-Wing, I think, coming at screen, and then it blasts out of the TV and into the full, widescreen of your theater movie screen. And it was like, now experience it on the big screen. And it was magical, absolutely magical.
And as we record this, Brian, it is the 80th birthday of George Lucas.
Oh, wow. Well, happy birthday.
Thank the maker.
Wherever he is. Yes. I was thinking, by the way, trying to question which edition had the extra rocks in front of R2-D2. It's almost like an archaeologist digging through sediment and trying to carbon date things where it's like, it's like, well, here, there's no McClunky. Okay, no McClunky, but we do have rocks in front of R2. I mean, there's always an article that comes out every time a new edition is released, whether it's Blu-ray, streaming, whatever. And it's like, all right, well, here's a list of everything that's different from the previous version.
That's okay. So I think I forgot about the McClunky.
I know.
Which is for those of you who are like, what's that? That's what Greedo in the last round of changes.
Mm-hmm.
Like Lucas made one last bit of changes on his way out the door. He has Greedo say McClunky right before Han shoots him.
It just sounds like a parody what you're saying right now. But
McClunky.
Now Greedo says McClunky before Han shoots. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? But it's true.
It is very true. So we've got 1997. That was the first round of changes.
Which was the
That was the
the
special
Jabba
editions.
scene in A New Hope
Yes,
that was added with the pretty
the
bad
first Java
CG,
scene.
which I don't love because it's so redundant. After we've just had that conversation between
Just
Han
as
and
a
Lando.
concept, the Java scene.
Yeah, the conversation, like we've just had that
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, it's unnecessary. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
I,
Yeah, we
I
did.
think he should have put it in with that tubby Irish guy,
Why not?
and then have no explanation for why Jabba looks the way he does.
I
In
thought you were gonna say
yeah.
make him someone else, but yeah.
No, just have him be Jabba, and then just there would be a whole bunch of novels about how all Hutts go through a metamorphosis or something like, but it would never be addressed. You know,
When they turn 30, 33, they all shed their.
they're like Mogwai. You know,
That is hilarious.
yeah, yeah. So there was 1997, and then 2004 was the DVD. That's when Hayden Christensen got added. Then he had 2012. That was. Well, shit. Now that what were the changes? Yeah, that was the rocks.
Okay.
That was the and Vader screaming no, right? That was in the Blu-rays.
That feels right. And I know there's some major color timing things that changed also. Like Hoth went from white to like kind of James Cameron blue.
Okay. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Thank you for that, Alex. Here's a note we got from Mark McGee who says, "Hey," and Mark is a big Planet of the Apes fan, by the way, so this means a lot. He says, "Thank you so much for your enjoyable commentary on Escape from the Planet of the Apes. It was great hearing insight from a newbie. I think that's you, Brian, and a super fan. I think that's me, like myself. I think one of the great joys in life is sharing a beloved film with someone else, and it's even better when that someone ends up liking the film. It was lovely listening to that type of experience involving a favorite of mine. Growing up in the 70s, Planet of the Apes was my Star Wars before Star Wars. I was introduced through the way too short-lived TV series and was immediately hooked. Despite my pleading, I wasn't allowed to see the original films when they were released. Mom thought they were horror films about men turning into apes, which actually made me want to see them more. I finally got to see them all when I lived in the New York City area on the WABC TV 430 movie. They were known for their theme weeks, and one of the most beloved was the Planet of the Apes week, where they showed all 5 films. Watching that week, along with my Cornelius, Zira, and Zaius action figures, I was in ape heaven. Escape was always my favorite as a kid, and like you, Zachy, I remember the initial reactions to the film's great light humor and its traumatic ending. The puffed cheeks of Cornelius and the brutal shooting of the baby really stuck with me. I loved Zira in the original film, but I really fell for her in Escape. Kim Hunter gave such a wonderful performance, as did Roddy McDowell as Cornelius. They had such great chemistry and were so adorable together. I think the film still holds up very well. As you stated, the sequels decline in budget and quality, but each one does a wonderful job continuing the saga with what they had. I greatly admire the recent remakes/reboots, but I'll always hold the 5 originals close to my heart, along with my sadly deteriorating Zira action figure. Thanks again, and I can't wait to hear you chat about Conquest and Battle. Take care, Mark McGee.
Thank you, Mark. And I agree. I love having Zachy share his love of these films.
It's fun for me revisiting them because you know I go through them every couple of years, and I think I've said this to you before. Like, I've introduced the Apes films to my kids at kind of the age where they just take them as they are, so they're not sitting there saying, "Oh, that looks fake" or whatever. They just take it,
Mm-hmm.
as a story, and so that's been fun. So I'm always curious, like, how does this work for an adult who's seeing it for the first time? Does it still play? So it's gratifying. Like, no, the drama works. And it's not like you're not cognizant of the limitations or whatever, but you're able to track with the story. And I think that says something about what they achieved.
Absolutely. I mean, with less budget, all you have is your story. You can't distract everyone with razzle dazzle. The razzle dazzle is a compelling story. And looking at how these movies have endured after all these years is a testament to how strong the stories really are.
And here's one last note we got from Dan Kiedis, who emailed us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. He says, "Hi, Zachy and Brian. Hope you guys are well. Just wanted to say what a blast I'm having as I take a deep dive through your, wait for it, Planet of the Apes commentary tracks. I'm glad we built up enough of a catalog of those that there's, people can sort of go on that journey."
Definitely.
He says, I know Zachy in particular is a huge fan of the series, but I'm sorry to say it's a huge blind spot for me, having only seen the Burton film and the recent prequels. Last night, however, I remedied this by watching the 1968 original, and wow, what a charming and visually sumptuous film. Yeah, you're goddamn right it is.
Actually, I was about to be like, look what you did, Zachy. Isn't that great? That's wonderful.
This has been the long-term mission of this whole podcast, actually. I'm just trying to get people to watch Planet of the Apes. He says, I'm hugely looking forward to watching the 4 sequels and listening to what you guys have to say about them. To change gears to another beloved franchise, I know a few listeners have been sharing their Batman 1989 theatrical experiences, and I have a tragic comic one of my own to add to the mix. He says, in the summer of 1989, I was beyond hyped to see Batman on the big screen, and after much begging and pleading, my mom finally agreed to take me. We were dirt poor, and neither of my parents could drive, so we walked for 45 minutes to get to the only cinema in the Lancashire mining town where I grew up. Upon seeing my 7-year-old self, the box office clerk informed my mother that the film was unsuitable for me, to which she replied, no, we're here to see Batman. Batman, the superhero thing. The clerk said that the film was violent and had some sexy scenes and that it wouldn't be appropriate for me. She said, he's seen The Omen. He'll be fine with Batman. But alas, no dice.
What?
You see, Batman was the first film in the UK to be released with a 12 certificate. Unlike the US PG-13 rating, a 12 certificate meant that no child under 12 could be admitted, even with their parents' consent.
Wow.
It would be replaced by the 12A certificate in 2002, which is functionally similar to PG-13. However, this didn't do 7-year-old me any good. Worse still, because it was a small one-screen cinema, there were no alternatives but to trudge back home.
Oh.
45-minute walk home was the saddest and angriest of my little life. Upon returning home, I locked myself in my room and angrily attempted to reenact the film with my Batman and Joker Toy Biz figures, cobbling together as much as the plot as I could from my collection of Batman 89 trading cards.
This is amazing. I was going to say he should put together a plot where he takes out that ticket taker.
Yeah, right? Something similar happened a few years later when my mom attempted to take me to see RoboCop 3. However, that time they did let me in to see The Naked Gun 33 1/3. In the prison shower scene with the drop the soap gag, my mom remarked, so you're too young to watch RoboCop, but this is fine? Now, I would offer that whoever kept you from watching RoboCop 3 did you a favor. He just didn't realize it. He says, sorry, it's not the happiest yarn, but hopefully an interesting insight into the eccentricities of the British Board of Film Classification. Thanks, as always, for all the free awesomeness. Your friend, Dan. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, very interesting. I felt the heartbreak on the 45-minute walk back. That would have been devastating. And
yeah, right.
I'm amazed, too. I mean, I know you can bring kids into R-rated films here in the United States, but it's the NC-17, right, where there's no one under 17 admitted, but I'm amazed that there was a no under 12 thing. That's really fascinating.
That's messed up. It's messed up, man.
I love that though, because I had those trading cards too. And I kind of did a similar thing. My parents actually didn't let me go see it when it came out because they had heard how violent it was. I remember there being news stories about warning parents about the film and it's too violent for kids. And so I think my parents bought into that. But it's so funny because then when it came out on VHS, they're like, it's fine.
It's funny. And then those news stories repeated themselves 3 years later.
Right, with Returns.
With Batman Returns. I remember this little asshole kid.
Yes, people should YouTube this, by the way, because...
Oh, my God. This kid, he's on one of these talk shows, and he's like, I was disgusted by it. I thought, and I really, like, whiny. This is like the Vichy France.
Dude, that is...
I'm like, you turncoat.
Dude, that is hilarious. I just finished a book on Winston Churchill, so that's ringing especially funny to me right now. But you know, I remember he says something about like, this movie is an attack against children or something like that. And it's just, it really feels like he's parroting things that his mother has told him.
Absolutely. That kid needed a good ass whooping on the schoolyard. That's all I'm saying.
You know what else is funny? You can see they cut to these reaction shots of kids in the audience, and you can see them being like, "Shut up!"
Yeah,
you know, because my parents are going to let me go see this now.
Which I mean, both of those movies are comparatively tame
Now, yeah.
with 30 years of hindsight. So either that means that people were just whining for no reason back then, or we've just become hardened and calloused over the years. I don't know what's worse.
I actually do think that's part of it. I do think things have gotten more intense, PG-13. But yeah, but no, I had the same experience. So I got the comic book adaptation, and I read that backwards and forwards. And so then when I saw the movie, there were certain lines that were in the comic because I'm sure it was written from like a shooting draft of the script, and things were cut later. And so I was like, wait, where's the thing where the Joker says, "Put my face on the dollar bill," and all those sorts of details.
I had the comic adaptation, but I had the novelization by Craig Shaw Gardner, which actually, speaking of Planet of the Apes, I had the audio book of that first, which was read by Roddy McDowell.
Oh, I kind of remember that.
Yeah. And I read the novel like front and back. I don't even know how many times. And I went into the movie totally expecting the horse chase sequence.
Oh, was that in the book?
It's in the book.
Oh.
So that was my first encounter with like, oh, okay. When I read the book beforehand, it's going to ruin the movie for me.
Okay.
So I stopped doing that.
Yeah, because that was a scene that was cut from the film.
That's right.
And that was when Sean Young was playing Vicky Vale, and she injured herself filming that horse scene. And then they cut the scene from the movie altogether, insult to injury.
Insult to injury, exactly. Yeah, but I remember that very well. I bought that book at an airport bookstore.
Totally. I remember seeing it at like the Jewel grocery store, like on the rack.
Yeah, I still have my copy from 1989. I have that in my garage.
Wow, how cool.
I've hung on to it all these years. I mean, I've never read it since then, but I'm just like, I don't want to give this away, you know? Like,
it's like a cool little totem or something, from your youth. But I have a question for you that cinches all of this together.
Okay.
So I remember, watching The Simpsons growing up, and when Bart is dressed like Bartman, and he turns to, someone and goes, "I'm Bartman." And so for me, that delighted me because I'm like, oh, that's the Batman movie. Like, it's a reference to the thing I like.
Yeah.
Obviously, I had that experience a lot. But I want to know for you that probably didn't see Planet of the Apes parodied a ton in popular culture in that moment. What was it like for you to see Planet of the Apes, the musical, in The Simpsons, a like 2.5 minute long parody of Planet of the Apes? I mean, was your mind absolutely blown?
It's so funny you bring this up because I happened to tweet about exactly that earlier this week.
Oh,
because somebody made that point where they're like, this is like the Simpsons just gave over, like you said, 2.5, 3 minutes to this joke. That's how good the joke was, the Planet of the Apes musical. And I was that aired February of '96, so I was a junior in high school. And I remember watching that, and the feeling I would describe is validation. That's what I felt, right? Because I was a super fan of Planet of the Apes in the mid '90s when this was a comatose franchise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No one was talking about it. I had that Planet of the Apes fanzine I mentioned to you, which that wasn't exactly like, it's not, you don't like impress girls with the Planet of the Apes fanzine, right? So it wasn't exactly a pit stop on the Dale Carnegie Highway for me, So it was just pure love of the game. And it was just one of those things where it wasn't like, people cannot understand. Like now, if I want to watch any of the Apes movies, I can within minutes I'll be able to pull it up on something, right? Back then they just were not available. There was no merchandise. There was no eBay to go to find, toys or magazines or whatever. It was everything was treasure. Finding Apes, anything from the 70s. And so having the Simpsons just really engage. I mean, they were coming at it from you had to be a fan.
Yes.
That's what was so validating. I was like, the people who make the show I love the thing I love.
Right.
And I don't know if any of this makes sense.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Because The Simpsons did a whole bunch of, even before Planet of the Apes musical, right? They did, there's one of the episodes where like the parents have to gather the kids to go to church, and it's a parody of the hunt sequence.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, Planet of the Apes, and then there's one where Homer's having a dream and it's the planet of the donuts.
I do remember that. Yeah.
And it was like somebody in a desert just getting like a few drops of water.
Mm-hmm.
Any reference,
Yeah.
because Planet of the Apes at that time was not a present tense franchise the way it is even now.
Right.
I mean, it's extraordinary because like Mego put out Planet of the Apes figures back in the day, and then now that company is back and they're doing retro style figures, and so I got the same figures that Mark McGee referred to. I got Cornelius and Zira, and and they're new, and I'm like, it's so easy to get this stuff. It's amazing.
That's so cool.
Right. Back then, it just wasn't the case. In 1998, it was the 30th anniversary of the original film, and so there was kind of a little push, mass media marketing push, and so Hasbro put out like 12-inch figures, and that was the first time I ever saw Apes merchandise. They put out these. I remember this at Suncoast. They had they released prints of the posters for Planet and Beneath, and I got those. And they put out shot glasses for Planet and Beneath. I have those.
How funny.
Because I was
this is like a time. What a moment for you.
Exactly. I still have those too. I still have those posters. I still have those shot glasses.
Yeah. Man, Suncoast was the coolest.
It really was.
In a time before the internet and internet shops. I mean, Suncoast was a movie store where they sold VHSs and movie posters and T-shirts, and I mean, walking through there was like walking through my imagination. Honestly, I loved walking through Suncoast.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so thank you, Brian, for that.
yeah. No, I love hearing that. I mean, I take it for granted. I think I was like, oh, Planet of the Apes, yeah, and this is funny, but that must have been, like you said, a drop in the desert. I mean, I love that was that for you.
Yeah, and doing that zine, it was, and I'm sure I've said this before, but it was gratifying because it connected me with a lot of people. One of my subscribers was this guy Eric Green, who ended up he wrote a book called Planet of the Apes as American Myth, which I think was based on a college thesis, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm mentioned in that book as like, here's how fandom continues. Oh, here's Zaki Hassan, this teenager from Chicago who has,
that's so cool.
And that exists forever, but above and beyond that, 10 years ago, exactly 10 years ago, I met Matt Reeves at the premiere of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and I got to show him my old zine, and we geeked out together about this stuff.
I love that. I remember that. I love that you had that moment.
Yeah. So that was cool. And I still have all of those issues that I did back in the day. I think I did 5, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I should just scan them and just create PDFs just so that I have some kind of soft copy format.
I literally was going to ask if you had scans of them. I think that would be great. You should put them up online somewhere.
Yeah. One of the things I did is back in the day, they were these Power Records. Power Records?
I don't know that I do.
This probably predates it. It's basically it was like little mini vinyls.
Okay.
That had stories for kids and whatever. So they did like adaptations of the movies and things like that.
Oh, like turn the page when you hear the chime, turn the page.
Kind of, but it was the stories were not storybooks; they were like comics.
Okay.
But the same idea basically.
Uh-huh.
But they did like original stories based on the television series, the Apes television series, and so one of those original stories I adapted into a comic. And so I did like a comic adaptation of this original story, and I serialized it over 2 issues. And it was just a great, it was just fun. It was an opportunity for me to be creative. Anyway.
That's great. I'm glad you still have this stuff. I really think you should scan it.
Yeah, I probably will at some point, once I can find the time to do it. But hey, let's take a short break, and we got some headlines to discuss. we're back. And hey, real quick, a little bit of sad news I wanted to mention just so that we mark these passings. Roger Corman passed away, Brian.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a legendary figure in filmmaking for a very long time. He worked with and mentored a lot of filmmakers we still very much know and love today.
Yeah, he was 98 years old, and for those of you who don't know, he was sort of the king of low budget run and gun filmmaking, and in essence, he provided an opportunity for not just filmmakers but actors to get their start in the industry. People who went on to have extraordinary careers, people like Martin Scorsese, people like James Cameron, Robert De Niro, Jack Nicholson. I saw a video recently of Jack Nicholson reflecting on Roger Corman's role in his career, and this is from a couple of years ago. And literally, Nicholson started crying when talking about how important Roger Corman was to him.
Wow.
Right. New World Pictures was what I knew him from. First time I ever became Roger Corman was in the context of in the early 1990s. There was the Fantastic Four movie,
right,
which went unreleased. But that movie came into existence solely as a way for the rights holders to hold on to the rights a little bit longer, and they did that by saying, "Oh crap, our license is going to run out unless we have something in production in like 30 days." Mm-hmm. And off they went to Roger Corman, who's like, "Hey, I got $1 million. Let's put on a show."
Right.
And the movie itself, I mean, it's not good, just to be clear, but it's remarkable that they were able to put it together in such a short amount of time and turn it around. And my point is, Roger Corman, his approach to filmmaking was much more viable at a time when theatrical allowed for much more diversity in the marketplace. So you could have, oh, Star Wars is a success. Let's quickly turn around, Battle Beyond the Stars.
Right.
Which, again, it's a low budget schlock fest, but guess what? That's where James Horner got his start. That's where, James Cameron started with some of the designs. I mean, it was an actual film production company that served as a film school.
Right. Right. Because, I mean, he couldn't pay much, right? I mean, I thought I'd read somewhere he was taking McDonald's meals and literally cutting them in half and giving them out to people. But yeah, he was building you up towards something.
That's right.
Yeah.
I saw a tweet from Gail Ann Hurd, who of course, she met Cameron, in the course of working at Corman Studios. But she said, "Roger Corman was my very first boss, my lifetime mentor, and my hero. Roger was one of the greatest visionaries in the history of cinema. I'm absolutely devastated by his loss and send my love and deepest condolences to the Corman family." And that's like across the board when you look at the way he was being feted. You kind of say, like, there's no modern equivalent to him.
That's true. And it's also interesting, to your point, I mean, for kids to work with someone who's going to pay them pennies, in the hopes that they could get onto something bigger someday, you could almost see a story where people look back and feel like they had been taken advantage of.
Yes.
Right. And then you just don't hear that. All you hear are these lovely stories, looking back on him and what a great guy he was. I mean, Ron Howard, like you said, James Cameron. I mean, so that's amazing. This is like the good version of that story.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you see the affection, that people who came up through his studio had for him in terms of the cameos that he would be given in various films, right? So he's in The Godfather Part 2 because Francis Coppola. He's in Silence of the Lambs because Jonathan Demme. He's in The Howling because of Joe Dante. He's in Apollo 13 because of Ron Howard. He's in Scream 3 because of Wes Craven, et cetera,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That too was always fun because I would always spot him and I'd be like, oh, this must be a film by a graduate of the Corman School,
Yep. Yeah.
So Roger Corman gone at 98. He will be missed.
Wow, 98.
Another passing, David Sanborn is gone at 78 years old. And who you may ask is David Sanborn? You know his music, if nothing else. Brian, do you know who David Sanborn is?
I do. And I mean, you brought him to my attention, but looking up all his credits, I absolutely do.
Yeah, so he was a saxophone player who, if you enjoyed the Lethal Weapon films, it's a fairly safe bet. You enjoyed them at least partly because of his very, very memorable, very distinctive saxophone music, which signified the Roger Murtaugh character.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at what's his face, Eric Clapton, his it's like intertwined. Michael Kamen, Eric Clapton, David Sanborn, all three of them together created the musical identity of the Lethal Weapon franchise.
Yep.
But obviously, above and beyond that, very, very talented musician, separate from Lethal Weapon. But given that this is a movie podcast, I felt like we had to mention that somebody who really, when you think about it, a very major presence in our childhoods.
Definitely. Definitely. And I mean, he played with a Saturday Night Live band for a little bit.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So he unfortunately passed away after a battle with cancer. Mm-hmm. And so let me be the first to say F cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Some other headlines here. Here's something interesting. I've been wanting to get your thoughts on this, Brian.
Yeah.
There are new Lord of the Rings movies on the way.
Yeah, I heard about this.
So now this is interesting because there was a bidding war, like 7 years ago for the rights to a television series based on Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
That ended up landing at Amazon Prime.
Yes.
Which led to the most expensive television series ever made.
$500 million, I believe.
Amazing.
Yep.
And so that one is continuing on its merry way. I think there's a new season coming for Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. This is not that because Warner Brothers has the feature film rights to Lord of the Rings.
Right.
So this is we're slicing the onion in all kinds of different ways.
Right. Isn't that funny? Just the minutia of all this. Like, well, you can make the movies, but you can do the TV, but you can have the radio play rights,
It really does feel like the Tolkien estate was waiting for Christopher Tolkien to kick the bucket before they just started selling this stuff off piecemeal,
Right.
Because Christopher was quite protective of his father's legacy, mm-hmm. and he was turning down lots of money, and I think now it's like, well, hey, we have an opportunity here. So Warner Brothers has made a new deal. And they brought on board Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens to produce.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
However, Andy Serkis is going to direct a new film called The Hunt for Gollum.
Yeah, I hate to admit, my first thought was I couldn't decide between, does Peter Jackson want to do this?
Yeah.
Or poor Peter Jackson.
Yeah, honestly, my feeling is Peter Jackson is like, if I don't do it, someone else is going to do it.
And so I really, really do hope, even after making 3 Hobbit films, that
which I like, I should say.
Yeah. No, but I just hope he is still passionate about this. I hope this still brings him joy. Because if so, awesome.
I think if you watch the behind the scenes of the Hobbit trilogy, I think those movies broke him in a way that can never be fixed.
See, that's my memory.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if this is just some sort of like he's shackled to these a little bit, or maybe he's like, knowing that he's not going to direct them, but he's just producing them. Maybe that's the concession a little bit, but I don't know. I mean, does he kind of wish he was making other things? I don't know. I mean, he's been in the documentary space lately, right? With the Beatles thing and the World
he
War
did
I.
that whatever that thing from a couple of years ago, right? That city, what was it? You know what I'm talking about?
No,
a couple of years. It was supposed to launch a huge new franchise, and it didn't happen.
It came out?
I'm pretty sure it did.
Wait, Peter Jackson. What's it called?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah. It's hold on. It's I got
remember
this.
The Lovely Bones, and
there was The Lovely Bones. Oh, maybe he
Kong.
just produced this. I thought he directed it. No, Mortal Engines.
Okay.
Mortal Engines.
He directed that?
He did not direct it.
Okay.
He produced it.
Okay.
But regardless, it tanked.
Right.
It tanked spectacularly.
Okay.
Right? It was a biblical level tank. right? And so I'm wondering, like this is my point. You say he wants to do other stuff. Well, yeah, I don't doubt it. But he was supposed to do a Tintin sequel. That never happened.
Remember that whole thing? That was Spielberg, Jackson. Was there another one, or was it just them two?
I think it was
As
just them two.
filmmakers? Okay, they were like, "Yeah, we're going in on this together. I'm gonna make a Tintin movie. He's gonna make a Tintin movie. Get ready, world."
There's going to be tons of Tintin.
Yeah, yeah.
Ton Tintin.
Ton Tintin for all the boys and girls, but that was not to be. Spielberg came out with his, which was perfectly fine.
You know what? That is a great. It's a beak wetter for kids to eventually watch an Indiana Jones.
Yeah, sure. I do remember there's a chase sequence across a town
Yes.
that is breathtaking.
Yeah.
Which makes complete sense by Spielberg. But yeah, poor Peter Jackson, he didn't even get to his.
Which is weird because I thought that movie performed well enough that a second one was a done deal. I don't think it was like a financial reason that kept it from happening.
I don't know. Interesting. But yeah, like I said, he's been doing documentaries. He did They Shall Not Grow Old, which is very, very good, by the way.
Yeah.
It's taking really old World War I film footage and using AI and who knows what else
to age them up. Be like, yeah, they shall not grow old. What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, but it makes the footage look very recent.
Yeah.
And so in a way takes sort of, 100-year-old history and makes it feel very, very relevant and relatable. And so it's great. I mean, he's doing really interesting things. But yes, when I heard Lord of the Rings, I hate to say it, I just felt this sad sort of, oh, does he feel like he has to go back to the well a little bit? But obviously that's not where this is coming from. This is Warner Brothers being like, we own this. Why isn't it printing money?
That's the thing, right? This is You can't help but sort of cast a gaze at David Zaslav and be like, bro, just like, can you leave some of this shit alone, please?
Right.
Because it's the same thing with Harry Potter, which I have no great emotional investment in, but I know plenty of people who do, and I can't imagine they're thrilled about having all of those books remade again.
I am so curious. Actually, I would love if someone wants to write in. I can't imagine loving Star Wars the way that I do if HBO was like, cool, we're going to remake A New Hope.
That's right.
And make it like a 10-episode miniseries on Max. I can't wrap my brain around that happening. So I wonder, because those movies are not that old, and I think people still think, when they think of Harry Potter, they picture Daniel Radcliffe,
That's right.
I'm very curious how people feel about that.
Yeah, and there's like the whole J.K. Rowling making her heel turn of it all.
Yeah.
Which is a whole separate conversation. So maybe she wants to distance herself from those kids, right?
I didn't even think about that.
You know what I mean? Because each of those stars has been like, hey, we don't want anything to do with what she's on about, right? I mean, without getting too far into this, I mean, the thing with J.K. Rowling, and I think I've said this before on the show, I'm like, you are on the record. Your objection is noted.
Right. Didn't Elon Musk even tweet out something about that recent? Like, we got it.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
Seriously, play a different tune, So anyway, that whole thing, very mercenary. But with this, I feel like it's coming from that same instinct on behalf of the bean counters, where it's like, well, this Lord of the Rings made a whole bunch of money for us back then. How about we do some more, And the thing of this, fully acknowledging, hey, Andy Serkis, awesome. Peter Jackson and company, awesome. Do I have any interest in a movie called The Hunt for Gollum? Gotta be honest, not really.
I know. I will say, if I see a trailer and it tingles that little Lord of the Rings tingle inside of me, where I'm like, oh, that feels like more of that thing I like, I could be motivated. But at the moment, my very first thought was, I know what happens to Gollum.
Right.
So, I mean, how am I supposed to, get excited about this? I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, will he even be in it? Is it really about a new crew who are in search of this mysterious person who's gone dark because of sort of item he found? We don't know much. You know what I mean? Is that what it's going to be, like a hunt movie? I don't know. There's a lot of things I think working against it.
Yes.
But I mean, Peter Jackson tends to have a good batting average in the Lord of the Rings world, so I'm open-minded, but you can't help but be also a little cynical about it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The older I get, the more I'm like, there's value in letting stories end, right?
Sure.
And certainly with Lord of the Rings, it comes to a fairly definitive conclusion, and I just don't feel like there's enough oxygen in the crevices to give us a whole raft of untold tales,
Yeah, or maybe it should involve just another corner
Yeah.
of the world. I mean, this is like you say, we're getting into now the crevices of a story that's already completed, that we know where it goes and we know this character's end, and I don't know. But I mean, if Andy Serkis is this invested in this, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's what has me intrigued,
Yeah.
right? But I mean, it's like the television show, which I don't mind it. I like it, but
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't like it doesn't touch what the films did.
Sure.
And I just read, the second season's coming out. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that that's a thing,
Kinda. Yeah.
Right?
I think I watched about half of it and was like, this is very good.
Yeah.
But I, missed a week and then I never went back.
I mean, it's not integral.
Yeah.
And more importantly, I mean, that show, I didn't get the sense that it really captured the public's fancy,
Can you imagine? $500 million.
I mean, yeah, to that point, right? That investment was made with the hope that it would really sort of drive the zeitgeist, and it feels like an afterthought because fundamentally you're telling a story that was never necessary to be told.
Yeah.
The story is in The Hobbit. The story is in Lord of the Rings.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then, when you have shows like that not succeed at that cost, then you start charging people like me $2.99 so I don't have to look at ads.
That's why when you order toilet paper from Amazon, each roll costs $79.99 just to make up for that shortfall. So this thing is due out. When is it? What's it saying? 2026.
Okay.
Like, I don't remember there being a groundswell of excitement for The Hobbit when that was a future tense thing,
I definitely remember interest petering as they continued coming out.
Each film, yeah.
I don't recall how people felt about the first one.
Well, I think I've said this before. I had the experience of watching it at a press screening that was a high frame rate, IMAX, 3D. And that rewired my brain to the point where I had to run out of the theater because I nearly passed out.
I remember you saying that. Yeah.
In fact, I did pass out. I nearly threw up. I didn't throw up, but I did pass out.
Holy cow.
So thank you, Peter Jackson, for that experience.
Man, that went away, didn't it? I mean, 3D was the thing after Avatar.
Yeah.
And that went hard, and we lived through that. But the high frame rate thing, that was like a big push also that
which was so bafflingly ill-conceived. It's like, hey, this way everything looks like an episode of Three's Company. Isn't that great?
Yeah. Right.
What are you doing? This is terrible. Terrible idea, Brian.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is due out in 2026. There's also an animated film coming out called War of the Rohirrim.
Okay.
Which I'm assuming is about Helm Hammerhand and the people who built Helm's Deep.
When is that due?
That is a good question.
They must be working on that right now.
That is due out. It says here December 13th, 2024. So.
Whoa. Okay. Buckle up.
It's a coming. Yeah, it says here, this is Wikipedia. Set 183 years before the events of the Lord of the Rings film trilogy, The War of the Rohirrim tells the story of Helm Hammerhand, a legendary king of Rohan, and his family as they defend their kingdom against an army of Dunlendings. Helm goes on to be the namesake for the stronghold Helm's Deep. All right, there we go.
Okay.
And this is, like I said, this is animated.
Interesting. I mean, that is... I'm very curious how
And
that
this
will
too,
be
this is
received.
interesting, Brian. It's produced by Philippa Boyens, but only Philippa Boyens. So no Peter Jackson or
Jackson.
Fran Walsh.
Okay. Well, hey, I mean, we over here at Movie Film are open minded. I want it all. I want it all to be great. So
I hope it's good.
Here's hoping. Here's hoping.
Here's hoping. Cast includes Brian Cox in the lead role, and
So we're gonna get a fun press tour later this year.
that's right. He'll just be shitting all over it. Miranda Otto as Eowyn, who narrates the film.
Oh, okay.
So there we go. All right. Well, I know people, Brian, people have asked us repeatedly to talk through the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So, hey, maybe this will be the thing.
All right.
Just carve out the 16 hours or whatever it is.
No, I mean, I would love to revisit those movies. It's been a while, and they're coming back to theaters. I think as a Fathom event coming up in June.
Yeah, like a wider thing. They did a thing early this year or late last year, I can't remember, where they put out the extended versions of the trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
I watched Fellowship for the first time in the theater, since it came out. And man, I'll tell you, that movie, it's amazing.
It's so good. I mean, It's so funny. That's just not my genre.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't love them, but they're just so good. The filmmaking is good. The storytelling is good. The actors are great. It's just one of those, once in a generation kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess watch the space. We'll be back with whatever else we hear about that. We'll probably be bitching some more, I guess.
I was just going to say, yeah.
Stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for Waldorf and Statler.
Jeez. Yeah.
But hey, let's take a short break and we'll come back and talk about the top movie in the country right now. And we are back. And you know who else is back, Brian?
Who's that, Zachy?
Why, it's that terrible Planet of the Apes. Wait a minute. Statue of Liberty? That was our planet!
You maniacs! I was just explaining that joke to my dad yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The Simpsons writers, they were my people, Brian.
They really were. Wow.
Oh, and by the way, we were name checking the guy just a little bit ago. Script for this movie by Josh Friedman.
Oh, for Sarah Connor Chronicles.
Yeah.
Ah, wow. All right. Well, this was the perfect convergence this week.
I think he has a fan in Brian.
Definitely.
And it's appropriate because both franchises are about the end of humanity by factors mechanical and monkey.
That's very funny. He clearly has something on his mind.
Yeah. So Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is in theaters right now. It is the top movie in the country. It opened to $58 million.
Not bad. I mean,
beat the spread.
I was going to say, and then the week before with the Fall Guy, right? I mean, there's a lot of talk about how disappointing that opening was, the kickoff to the summer, and then leave it to the Apes to get the job done.
Yeah, so pretty strong opening for a film that actually had a decent budget, $160 million for a movie like this. I mean, it's not cheap, obviously, but I mean, given how much is lavished on these blockbusters, I was just reading an article about how they spent $415 million on Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which is just insanity. 160. That's the equivalent of the $3 million that they spent on Beneath the Planet of the Apes or whatever.
There was a moment during this movie where it's nothing but apes, moving around, and I was like, nothing on this screen is real, and it looks so good. And then I had a thought. I was like, I wish I wasn't going to pull up my phone, but I was like, what did they spend on this? So I'm glad you brought that up, because hearing that it's 160, it's under 200 million for this whole movie basically being a visual effect. I mean, there's no excuse. There's just no excuse.
Yeah. You do wonder. I mean, certainly 415 million for Doctor Strange 2. That boggles the mind to me. I can't even process that.
Yeah.
So this film is directed by Wes Ball, and it is a sequel to the previous trilogy, the Caesar trilogy, which concluded in 2017. However, it's the beginning of a new story, and I think I found that kind of refreshing. And we were talking earlier in this episode about sort of like letting stories end, and I was thinking, I was like, this is a good example of how to do something like this, where you let stories end and you can continue to tell different stories within a world if the framework, so to speak, is sturdy enough to allow, but you're doing something new. So it's not completely beholden to just sort of picking a carcass clean, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Watching this film, the thought I had, and I'd love to hear your thought about very shortly in, I would say within 20 minutes or so, I was like, I'm getting A New Hope vibes from this movie,
Totally.
right? And in a number of ways, I mean, the lead character played by Owen Teague, very very Luke Skywalker-esque, but also just the idea that Star Wars exists as a sequel to those prior three films, but you do not have to have seen them in order to get something out of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this film works in much the same way, because it puts us in the shoes of a character who's learning about this world.
Yeah, that's really good. It's funny. I try to write down a couple thoughts so I don't lose them after I watch a movie, so I'll remember. And I actually, halfway through this movie, which, by the way, I'm just going to go ahead and say I enjoyed the heck out of this movie.
Awesome.
Halfway through, I thought, wow, this is like a really simple story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a negative comment. I mean, I kind of admired it for that. I was like, this is a true hero's journey tale.
Yeah.
And when done well with characters that are interesting, I mean, those are like really rousing and exciting stories, and emotionally resonant too. Like someone who's leaving something that they know behind, or it's taken away from them, and then they have to step out into a larger world and become who they're going to become. Like those are really captivating stories. I mean, to me at least. And I definitely felt that with this. So that's funny you say that about A New Hope, because that's such a hero's journey story itself.
Yeah. And it's, there's parallels you can plot without it being slavishly, evocative of it. But, the thought I had while watching is, I was reminded of Charlton Heston and sort of his reservations about doing any sequels past the first one. And, per his telling, he's like, well, we've told the story, which is about this character, this astronaut who goes on this journey, and then he finds this thing out. And he's like, that's the story that's interesting. Anything beyond that is just adventures among the apes.
Mm.
And I was like, I get that. Like, I was like, that's the story he wanted to tell. Mm-hmm. But the beauty of it, as has been borne out not just by this film, but all the other films, is if the world you've created is compelling enough, then those adventures among the apes will be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so for me, that's what was fun about this film. I like, by the way, we start with a prologue, which directly picks up right where the last film ended.
Mm-hmm.
But then, as I said earlier, we're dropped 300 years into the future, and we're expected, okay, figure this out. We in the audience, we have to figure it out just like the characters in the movie.
Right.
And I think that's fun. I like that. I like the sense of discovery of, oh, what's going on here? I'm watching this. I'm a fan of this franchise. I have no idea what's going to happen. That's the most fun for me.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think it was kind of smart to have that opening.
Yeah.
For several reasons. I mean, one, it connects them to the previous three.
Yeah.
But also Caesar, who is not in this movie, is a very important figure to everyone for different reasons.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that the movie sort of cements who he was.
Yes.
And how people felt about him. And then we have to witness hundreds of years later what people have done with the idea of Caesar.
Yeah, right. And there's something that when I don't know if you revisited the earlier trilogy. I think I mentioned to you that I just rewatched them about a month ago. There's something about going from those three films into this series that really drives home the the horror, if you will, of seeing our world, you know, just gone.
Mm-hmm.
Like the series starts in the present day.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just something about that as it progresses by, even by the third film, things have changed, but humans are still humans, like,
Right.
and then we're here and the hunt sequence, which brilliantly evokes
Uh-huh.
the one from the original film, but isn't, it doesn't feel like it's trying to one up it.
Yeah, but it lets us know that this is the moment we are in now.
Yeah, and when you think about it, right? Like, because I was describing this to my brother, I was like, what this movie does, it feels like, because there is a human story,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of us experiencing this story from the human's perspective, we back into it from the perspective of the apes,
Right.
and that's so interesting. So, in other words, it's this inversion of the original film,
Right.
right?
Yeah, I
Um,
love that about it.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean the hunt sequence. That John Paisano did the music. He's clearly, like, he brings in right away the opening notes of Jerry Goldsmith's music, and then he has the ram's horn. I mean, there's a lot of love for the franchise
Yeah.
in this movie. But what I like is that the nods towards the broader history are subtle enough where it doesn't call attention to itself.
Yeah. 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 No, I just I guess I should say I didn't revisit the previous three of the newer
Hmm.
films, and
Right.
my relationship to them is I have enjoyed them when they came out.
Yeah.
I left them being like, those were good, but I have not gone back and revisited them.
Mm,
They're just, oh, those were good movies I saw, and I
yeah.
kind of move on.
Sure. Sure.
And so when this was coming out, I had this feeling like, oh, cool, another one.
Hmm.
Like I wasn't super anticipating it. I actually, Federica texted me and was like, are you looking forward to it? And I was like, you know what? Yes. And for the reason that I can't say that I'm like, oh, awesome, like a new Planet of the Apes movie. But for me, it's more like, oh, I can kind of depend on these.
You're right.
Like these are just kind of solid films. And they come up with these sort of solid, almost old school type stories that just are just sturdy and affecting. And that is exactly what I got out of it. I mean, I sat down with no expectations, was like, let's go. And I was dropped in, and immediately I was like totally into Noah.
Yeah.
The character of Noah, our hero. Like I don't know, like I wouldn't call him like an outcast, but he has these feelings, with his father wanting to please him, not sure that he will. And we can get into details later, but just, the thing that leads him into the adventure, I was completely taken with it. I found myself when things would go well, I would laugh. When things went bad, I actually gasped.
Hmm.
And it occurred to me, I was like, oh, I am in, like, I'm locked in.
Yeah.
And what I love too is I, I know this is the wrong word, but I keep thinking of simple, but it's, even
It's
just down to
straightforward.
straightforward, even like the action sequences. We were talking about that hunt sequence, and we have the human character, who I'll call Nova, I guess. She, like, the action sequence is apes are after her. Can she get on this horse in time? That's it. And I
Yep.
found myself squirming in my seat. And when, I mean, I think it's in the trailer, she gets on the horse, and I exhaled. I was like, and it occurred to me, even in the moment, like, wow, that wasn't overly complicated. It's just real life adventure and tension. And I appreciated the straightforwardness
Yeah.
of this film and its ability to make me care about what was happening. And oh, this was another thing I want to say as a compliment. I did not know how long it was. I assumed it was over 2 hours because every movie's over 2 hours now. But I decided not to look because I thought,
Interesting.
if I know that it's 2.5 hours, I'm going to be thinking about it. And I was like, almost as an experiment, I want to go into this and see if I ever think about the time.
Wow.
Let's just go. And the only time I did, and it wasn't because of time. Well, actually, I won't. This is a little bit details, but the point being, I didn't think
Yeah.
about the time because I didn't know what was going to happen next. And so I kept wanting to know what was going to happen. And, he meets people along the way. They're very endearing. The Raka character, absolutely love that character. And it's amazing and a testament to the acting, but also to the visual effects department. They feel like living, breathing people with personalities and facial tics and just, I don't know. I like I said, I laughed with them. I cried with them. I was in, man. I was into this movie.
Well, that makes me happy. I think what I've been saying for a while, when the last film came out and it brought that story to a very definitive end, I said, maybe I said it on our show, I can't remember. I said, well, just because Caesar's story is done, it doesn't. I mean, it's the main character is the planet of the apes,
Mm-hmm.
and there's lots of stories to tell because you've got thousands of years worth of time you can fill in,
Mm-hmm.
And so it was gratifying that Wes Ball, who honestly I haven't seen the Maze Runner films, so
I haven't either.
I can't speak to those, but I'm like, this guy is a talent based on what I saw here.
I love what he did here.
Yeah.
I love the direction. I love
I mean, it's
the
remarkable.
way that they used visual effects. Sometimes I couldn't tell what was a visual effect and what wasn't in terms of habitats, right?
Yeah, I mean, the film was shot in Australia. However, they are traipsing through the remains of Los Angeles,
Yeah, right.
and it's remarkable,
Yeah, that was that was fun. I guess I should feel ominous feelings, but I was like, hey, LAX,
right?
cool.
But I mean, his approach to the story, I think, and it's funny because it's like if you're not on board with, for the first half hour we're just gonna follow ape characters, then yeah, this ain't the movie for you. I mean, clearly, but it's like the previous films have already acclimated us to the idea that the apes are a protagonist,
Yeah, it's funny that wouldn't even occur to me. I sort of like, well, what did you think was going to happen?
So that's kind of weird, and I personally I like that. I like that there is a human storyline, but we're walked over to that by virtue of going along with the apes. You mentioned the Raka character. First of all, total Obi-Wan Kenobi, right?
Totally.
He's played by Peter Macon, and it's just amazing. I mean, like you said, it's like the ape effects in that prior trilogy improved with each movie, and we're at a point now where it's like, I mean, I'm not looking at an effect; I'm looking at an ape character.
Yeah, I think it's insane. I mean, there's certain shots where they're backlit by a campfire or something, and you're just seeing these little hairs on their chins, and it's remarkable, the work in this movie. But
really
that
is.
character, go ahead.
No, Raka, right?
Well, yeah, I what I love about this tale is you really do begin with a guy who just all he knows is what he knows. He lives in his village. He knows his father's ways, and he wants to try to impress his father. And I love this moment where it opens with there's going to be this big ceremony the next day, and that is the most important thing in the world. But then everything is turned upside down for him, and he leaves, and the world is so much bigger, and the whole thing about humans and even like Caesar, and he kind of begins this movie as sort of like agnostic to all of it, right? And so then he is introduced to the concept or the teachings or whatever, the sayings of Caesar, but from different points of view, where he gets it from this Raka character, where Caesar said, apes and humans should get along and you shouldn't kill one another. And, it's about kindness, like living is about kindness and all these sorts of things. But then he meets the antagonist later, the Proximus, and he's using Caesar to push his own agenda. It reminds you a lot of sort of like Bad Religion or something.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Where it's like something that it can be like an objectively uplifting idea can be twisted and weaponized by terrible people.
Yeah, almost like Donald Trump selling a Bible.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I love then seeing this character leave his world and then go out and have to kind of make up his own mind about these things and figure out who he's going to be in this world. Yeah,
I just to pick up on that point, like I I like how the film adds these complexities. So it's not as simple as humans good, apes bad, or apes good, humans bad. Now we have a situation where there's a little bit of both,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Like you mentioned, Proximus Caesar, played by Kevin Durand, who is fantastic in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, like I know Kevin Durand. I've seen him. It's like he just like I can see him in there, but this is a creature. Like my mind boggles at how they achieved this.
I know.
But the central conflict, which the third act revolves around. Man, I just love all the ways it takes us into moral gray areas, and it's really like I think anyway, the movie ends and you're like, I'm not sure how I feel about any of this.
I know. Which is kind of fun, isn't it? Because then you have to sort of wade your way through it yourself.
Yeah. Right. And I think to me, this is something I've said to you before. I think that's one of the defining characteristics of the Apes franchise is that the endings of these films are not feel good endings.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been the case with the Caesar trilogy, which juxtaposes, as Caesar, he rises up to the tree and he looks out at the horizon with this triumphant swelling of music. And then, mid credits, we see the plague spreading that's going to wipe out humanity.
Right.
And then of course the second one ends with, the last moment that humans and apes might have had peace doesn't happen. And the third one ends with, we see the plague has taken over. Even, the antagonist played by Woody Harrelson, he's reduced to a feral creature, and then Caesar dies. I mean, these are meant to leave you, not feeling great. And weirdly, that's what feels good.
Right.
And so this film carries on that tradition. And it's funny because I've seen a lot of like, all this movie is doing, it's just a setup to a more interesting sequel. And I'm like, I beg to differ. I think this is an interesting story that leaves some threads in play for what could be also an interesting sequel, but that doesn't make this story itself any less compelling. I've seen the movie twice now, and I was pulled in both times. I think the character journeys in this are relevant, and I feel like they're going to resonate beyond this film. But you know what I mean? It's not. This is not. I mean, it comes to enough of a conclusion where you feel like you've been on a journey.
Spoilers.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely tracked with this as a complete story, and it made me look forward to whatever's ahead. I think if I had anything I would note, it would just be a few more insights occasionally into what Noah is feeling. And I'm definitely able to track with him throughout the film. I mean, the acting is very good. You can definitely see when he's skeptical or willing to trust or hopeful or whatever. But he also does a lot of inner processing. And occasionally I found myself wishing I could hear him articulate some of the things that he was thinking. One of the examples I'm thinking of, I guess, is regarding May at the end of the story when she shows up at his village. So he'd been skeptical of her throughout the whole journey, but was still trying to be helpful because, Raka had shared Caesar's beliefs about apes and humans getting along. But I wasn't quite clocking how he felt seeing her at the end. I mean, he seemed wary, of course, but I thought he might be more visibly upset about her essentially leaving his people to die in that flood.
I think he's extremely upset about that, and the only reason he lets it go is because of what he gives her. He's like, this is the reason because Raka said this.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
And he gives her the pendant almost to say, like, not all apes are bad either,
Right. And see, I could see in another movie where maybe you might even put some of that into dialogue. It is very, again, it's almost internal. This is what's churning inside them. And I applaud the movie for that. But I also did walking out, me and my friend were just sort of like had some questions. But
Yeah.
but with her, I also loved her.
I mean,
you
she's
know,
not a hero. I kind of liked that, to be honest.
no, definitely me too. And I loved the reveal that she had a gun behind her back while
Yeah,
she was
oh,
talking to
absolutely.
him.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so good. And that's where we're at. That's the ape human relations, like
Yeah.
even when we go on some sort of adventure together and we have some sort of experience that we can share, there is no trust. But like you said, what he gleaned from Raka is that he hopes that there
Yes.
can, he took that from Caesar's, example.
Right. So I mean, this is the thing, right? Like, yeah, I mean, Caesar, as seen in the previous films, he's trying to find a way for humans and apes to coexist, right? And that's wonderfully illustrated in the second film. We're at a point now where I love what Noah says, right? Where at the end she's like, that place wasn't for apes,
Mhm.
the silo. And he's like, well, what is for apes then?
Right.
Like I mean, this is our planet now,
Mm-hmm.
and the sense of fundamentally, like, we in the audience are supposed to be like, whose side are we on here,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
I mean, this, because this is the thing. This is what I love. May, right? Who initially I was like, oh, I think she's an astronaut. She's not an astronaut, but I think that's a plot thread, by the way, that's still dangling.
Yeah, I wondered if she was a time traveler or something.
I think a time traveler thing is still going to happen at some point, because that's something they left a thread in Rise of the Planet of the Apes that they can still come back to. But what she represents is an attempt to reclaim the planet.
Right.
But it's left deliberately vague.
Right.
About how many of them there are, about what their intentions are, right? I don't think coexistence is like, this is what Freya Allen, who plays May, this is what she said. She said that as shot, May goes there to kill Noah because he's too smart. And so
at the end.
At the end.
That's why she was there.
That's why she had the gun. As shot, she's actually pointing her gun at him when he has his back turned to her. And then she puts it away. And she said they edited it to soften that a little bit. I'm glad they did it the way they did. But my point
I wonder if I might have liked that, because to me it was more like she was on guard, like high alert.
Well, I kind of prefer that, because I think we need to be not entirely sure about May. I think once we see her pointing a gun at Noah, it's going to slant us too far against her.
Yeah, but if we had gotten some sort of exposition where
Yes.
if she could have bounced off of someone and said, I met this one, he's different, like he's kind and whatever, but like that might make him the most dangerous of all or something.
Sure.
And it's like, well, do you want to survive on this planet or not? And then her going over there prepared to do it, but she doesn't. I don't know. Like I wouldn't have minded that. I'll be honest.
I'm torn. It's complicated,
I know, but I don't mind the ambiguity either.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm invested. I'm ready for the next one to keep going.
This is the thing, because you have Trevathan, right, the human collaborator, who's played by William H. Macy, and it's so interesting because you look at him, and I'm like, God, this guy, this freaking guy,
Yeah,
he's like, you got a good life here. Just why are you rocking the boat?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, when he tries to stop her from executing her plan, and she just straight up kills him.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I was like, oh my God.
No, I was not prepared for that. Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, this is the thing. It's because I've said this about the original Planet of the Apes. It's a what would you do movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is a what would you do movie. If you're Trevathan, what do you do? If you're May, what do you do? I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's afterwards, knowing, once the film is completed and you know that she does have this society of people, like she knows there's a spark that something could go positive for humans again. Certainly she'd have a different perspective than the Trevathan character, who's like, hey man, out there, like, I don't want to be like drinking out of creeks where zebras are like pissing. You know what I mean? Like I get to be in this place reading books to an ape. Fine.
Right. I mean, hey, Vichy France, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah. You can totally see. It's what would you do? Like, would
yeah,
I settle?
yeah.
Would I continue to persist? I don't know.
I mean, that's the question. I mean, by the time we get to, which by the way, that it's all shot in Australia, but I feel like that where the silo is, it's at least geographically meant to be Point Doom,
I wondered.
right?
Yeah.
Certainly, those shots of them along the. As soon as you have a Planet of the Apes movie where people are walking along a beach, you're gonna think about the end of the first movie, no matter
Hmm.
what. So I couldn't help but think about that. But it's like, well, obviously Proximus is a bad guy,
Hmm.
but is what he wants so wrong, which is for apes to advance?
Hmm. Hmm.
Given that the majority of humans are animals. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like it's complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. It is complicated because I didn't know how to feel about him because we're introduced to him basically terrorizing and kidnapping
Yeah.
a village and killing
Yeah.
our hero's father. So I don't like him.
Well,
But
and I love, by the way, I love how you talk about misusing religious fervor or religious iconography, taking Caesar's apes together strong,
uh-huh.
which is meant to be an empowerment, a self empowerment, and
Yeah.
turning it into you all together. You're going to be my slaves because together you're strong for me.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So then it's like he gets there and he's a little slippery. He's not as overtly nasty as you might think, like when he's talking to them. But yeah, you
Right.
look at what he's doing, he's taking them all for this labor, and it's a good, interesting villain. And I love
I
that setting, by the way, the silo.
Oh, it's great.
I mean, the mystery of it. I was so curious what was inside. I thought,
Yep.
is it a time machine? Is it, when she was saying it can help humans to speak again, I was like, is it the internet? Like, what is it?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Is it's that hard drive or whatever that was.
Hmm.
That was her assignment. She had to get that. But what is that?
But I also love that it's filled with weapons and tanks, and
Hmm.
it's like they can't have this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the action set piece of the third act flooding it, I just found really compelling and exciting. And when that giant ape is chasing Noah and he gets basically trapped beneath those pipes, I was like, oof.
Hmm.
That was
Yeah. Yeah. The whole when they go through this it's meant to be kind of like the last it's like the in T3 the
mm-hmm.
bunker in T3 kind of
Yeah.
it's like haunting because there's no bodies or anything either,
Yeah.
so it's like, did anybody even make it here, like,
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, there's no skeletons or anything.
right?
I,
um
oh yeah,
w-
yeah. Sorry.
One point when they go into the what we presume is a schoolroom, they find a doll, and it makes that noise, which is of course a tie-in to the original film.
Hmm.
That's the exact same sound that the doll in the first movie makes,
Oh, funny.
because believe me, I know exactly what that doll sounds
I
like.
bet. No, I was gonna say with that exact same moment, I loved also, just by nature of who I am, I want everyone to team up and get along and become best friends, by the end of the movie. But
Yeah.
that's just not what this is. And you continue to not understand May. I mean, first she doesn't speak, then you find out she's very intelligent. And then, like you said, she encounters one of her own kind, another human, and then she kills him to get
Yep.
what she wants. And so then when the apes are and their reaction when they're
Yep.
looking at her like,
Yep.
oh, whoa, okay. And so when then they have that moment alone in the library and they see that book of humans looking at apes behind bars, and then she
Hmm.
comes in and they turn and look at her, I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. They just can't trust one another.
And that's, I mean, fundamentally, if we say Planet of the Apes, we know that at some point we have to end up with Chuck Heston or some version thereof getting chased through a cornfield.
Uh-huh.
Like, that's the end point. In other words, the idea of humans dominating apes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that we're on a journey that is not going to end well for the humans.
Right.
Right? So that's the question. So even like the end of the film, as May, reaches, this place where there's some semblance of humanity is left, right? Oh, I love this, by the way. David Ace Gutierrez said this on Facebook. I found this funny. He says, spoilers for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. The supermodels are going to make it.
Dude, I had the same.
So
I think I
funny.
turned to my friend. When she first appeared, I was like, "Good Lord, she's gorgeous." And then when she gets to that bunker or whatever, and it's filled with these like really attractive 29-year-olds, I couldn't help but laugh.
But it's ominous, like that to me. That was the feeling. Like they reach out, they get the whatever May brought back, and then they get the satellite working. By the way, they make contact. Who do they make contact with? Fort Wayne, Indiana. Which, if you know anything about Apes lore, where's George Taylor from? Fort Wayne, Indiana. That reference is not by accident.
Wow. Okay. I did not see. I need you for this.
Yeah. In fact, the first time I ever heard of Fort Wayne, Indiana, was the original Planet of the Apes.
Wow.
In the original film, when Taylor is like he's writing notes to Cornelius and Zira because he can't talk because he's been wounded. Cornelius says, "Where did you learn to do this?" And he writes, "Jefferson Public School, Fort Wayne, Indiana." So I don't think you put it in a reference like that by chance. I think if it's either it's either just a nod to be like, hey, remember that thing, or there's they're trying to make you think of the original film.
I mean, they said they have a story mapped out, so I do wonder if it's all leading. Even with the Griffith Observatory, the telescope, I was wondering if for the trilogy, if this is Chekhov's telescope.
Feels like it, right? Like what's up there? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, to me, that when they connect with Indiana, that felt ominous to me rather than, oh, great.
Oh, explain that. What do you mean?
Because I'm like, the humans are going to do everything they can to reclaim the planet. And that, like, I don't think coexistence is on the agenda.
Right.
Right. And so that's interesting because that's what these films do. They put you in the position of, of being like, yeah, these humans, they suck.
Right.
It's like at the end of Escape, you're like, God, Dr. Hassline, what a freaking douchebag,
Yeah.
That's where these films take us. So for me, there's something slightly ominous about the contact that's made because it's like, well, what does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, again, what I like is it's certainly based on this opening weekend and assuming it doesn't just collapse next weekend, which I don't expect it will. That means they will get to continue their story.
Yeah.
And that's gratifying. Like I it's an interesting start and it's something like I want to see what happens next,
Yeah. So, I mean, as I know we've already talked all the way through this, but so as a diehard Planet of the Apes fan, I mean, do you feel good? Like this is a good kickoff then to a new trilogy? There's a lot of promise here with what we have with the humans in the bunker. We get the, Noah is our new hero. You feeling good?
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting thing is I think we're at a point now where we're now moving closer to the, chronologically we're moving closer to that original film. And just to be clear, I'm not saying, I don't expect that we're going to end up at exactly where that, like, it's not going to be like Rogue One leading into Star Wars.
Sure.
However, I expect we're going to get somewhere close to that. And so what I like is they're doing what I want, which is, hey, tell stories here and there, jumping all over time, sort of filling in those gaps of how we get there.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the thing. I mean, I'm assuming based on this film, there has not been a nuclear war. And to me, if you still have humans out there and these weapons exist, that means there's still room for us to mess things up even more.
Right.
And that's the stuff I find interesting. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does, and it makes me happy. You're the one who I'm most interested in if this works. If it works for you, and I'm so happy to hear that it did.
So one more thought I had, I was thinking about the character of Trevathan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think casting William H. Macy is very deliberate because we just have a reflexive fondness for William H. Macy.
Yeah, he's the type of he plays the type of characters where he can be doing things we're not so sure about, but we're still sort of on his side nervously or something.
Yeah.
Or at least we're not. I'm thinking of Fargo. It's not like we're necessarily rooting for him, but we're also sort of sweating with him, if that makes any sense.
Right. And certainly that's applicable here because he is a party to the apes taking over. And they're not benevolent apes. I mean, Proximus has specific designs on subjugating not just humans, other apes.
Right.
But it's one of those, he's Trevathan is like he's like Sam Jackson in Django.
Sure.
He's the guy who gets to live inside the house.
Right.
And
Right.
and it brought to mind a couple of things. There's a journalist named Ann Applebaum who a couple of years ago, she this is in the context of the 2020 election, but she was talking about sort of human nature, longitudinally, and she said that uh, collaboration in the negative context is easier for most people than resistance.
Mm,
That's
right.
just, and we were talking about the Vichy French and everything, but the other thing it drew to my mind was the book, The Monkey Planet,
Hmm.
which of course started the whole Megillah, if you will. And in that book, you have the human lead who's an analog to the Charlton Heston character in the original film, but he sees the experiments that the ape scientists are doing, where they have the humans who are feral humans, but they use this procedure to delve into like residual memory going back hundreds of generations.
Hmm.
And so these feral humans speak in the voices of the humans that were around before the apes took over. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And they're describing. So you have a woman who is a scientist, a human scientist, and she's like, "Oh, the apes have taken over, and I don't know what to do." And
Oh,
then
wow.
"Oh, they I'm living in a cage, and they change the straw, and they treat me well, and this isn't such a bad life,
Man,
just
I could see how that would be hard to translate into a movie,
yeah."
the whole way that they extract those things, but that is really cool and creepy.
Right? It's haunting, and I'll tell you something. I mean, it's been several decades since I read that book, but that always stayed with me.
Mm-hmm.
Where it wasn't so much they were defeated, but they just
Right.
gave in. They're like, it's okay. I
Right.
get I have straw to sleep on,
Right.
And it's scary to think about because I connect that to that Applebaum quote. It's just collaboration. It's just easier.
Right.
And
Right.
and so that's Trevathan.
Right.
Right. And so it's like, man, it's like I look at it and I'm like, well, I don't want to be Trevathan, but I don't know if I want to be May either.
I know.
And I think if a movie leaves you asking questions like that, if it leaves you uncomfortable, to me, I think it's doing something right.
I completely agree. That's some of the best things about sci-fi.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, to be honest. I texted you. I was like, honestly, I can't wait to find out on air. Did you like it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I just love that I was able to kick back and watch something that felt like an old-fashioned adventure.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it definitely lived up to what I was saying earlier about the films in the series. This was another solid, engaging adventure at the movies.
That's kind of, I mean, this is what people have been saying, certainly about the last, the Caesar trilogy, is just like qualitatively consistent and successful at a level that warrants them continuing, but not so successful that the studio starts sticking its fingers in the pie.
Mm.
And I certainly hope that continues to be the case. I think the fact that this film opened as well as it did, and the fact that the budget was relatively low, is a good sign, because it says you don't need a star to sell this. The concept sells itself,
Yeah.
and presumably, you've got your cast locked in, so that means that the budget doesn't have to rise appreciably.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's all to me, that's all promising in terms of being able to tell a story. Rick Joff and Amanda Silver, who got this whole thing, the reboot started because they wrote Rise of the Planet of the Apes. This is what Rick Joff said. He's like, I envision this as like a 9-movie saga.
Hmm.
In other words, the Caesar trilogy, this trilogy, and then one more after.
Mm.
We'll see if they get there. But I do think there's enough momentum to complete this trilogy, and that makes me happy.
Yeah. And I also love that this is such an interesting property for a blockbuster that continues to be a blockbuster.
Right.
I love that. I love that it doesn't just have to be sort of the superhero thing or some IP from our childhood. Like you're saying, when we were kids, this wasn't a thing for me.
Right.
But they came out of the gate with these new ones a couple of years ago strong, and people responded to them. And now Planet of the Apes is a bankable, film series that people show up for. I think that's really exciting.
I think so. And it's, I took my kids, Miku, it ended. He's like, that's my favorite out of all of them.
Really?
Right. And he's like, it's my second favorite movie of the year after Dune.
Wow.
So that's Miku. And my daughter, she's 7. She's like, Baba, when can I go see Kingdom? Right. And so she wanted to see it. And then, my 10-year-old, I took him with me on Wednesday. And then, I went again on Sunday because Amina wanted to see it. And my 10-year-old's like, hey, can I watch it again? I want to come. And he's never in his life watched a movie twice in the theater.
That's what I'm saying. It's straightforward. I'm glad you gave me a better word, because there's magic in that when you do straightforward well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think not overcomplicating things, not feeling like you have to throw razzle dazzle in my face and distract me from, what isn't there in your movie. I mean, it's just a compelling character, compelling situations, compelling problems. What would you do? Situations and problems.
Yeah.
You walk out feeling exhilarated. So yeah, I'm glad.
And if nothing else, it really drives home something I've said to you a few times, where there's also value in not chasing the expanded universe and the the armload of spin-offs and whatnot. Just every couple of years put out a movie, let that be your focus.
Sure.
And people will show up. We don't need the streaming series, and we don't need, it's just, let this be what it is.
Let it remain special and not oversaturated. Yeah.
Because the truth is, what really stuck out to me was the care and attention given to the world building, where it feels like a natural progression from the last trilogy, but also expanding out what we can expect. And that's something where I'm like, well, I want to see more of this. Like the apes who the bad guy apes, Proximus, they're wearing these masks that are kind of vaguely Ku Klux Klan looking. And I'm like, well, that's interesting,
Yeah.
And like, what is the ape culture? Like, we've just seen this one clan, but there's more to explore,
Right.
Think about it. The earlier films were set in the Bay Area. This is set in Los Angeles. What is the rest of America? We haven't even gotten to the East Coast, where I'm pretty sure there's a half-buried statue at some point,
Yep. Yeah.
Like, that's the stuff I want to see as we move forward, because there's room for that. There's room to tell those stories, I don't know if you stayed through the credits, but at the very, very end, there is the sound of an orangutan, sort of like making like an orangutan noise. And
I didn't.
I took that to mean that Raka is alive.
Oh, thank goodness. They did a good job of it felt final.
Yes.
But I would be happy, because I liked him so much, if he showed up again.
Yeah, and it wouldn't feel too much of a fake out, right?
No, if he had fallen off of 2 waterfalls and landed into rocks or something, where you're like, okay, I don't know if he would have made that.
Yeah. That's my guess. And certainly he's such a popular character, just based on anecdotally the reaction I've seen.
Yeah.
I would see him come in. The audience applauded, by the way, that I went to see it with on Sunday anyway.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, all right. It was mostly families. It was pretty cool. I was like, okay, this seems to be crossing sort of, age boundaries. Seems like people of all ages are enjoying it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I was surprised. My daughter mostly sat still for most of it.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, it's over 2 hours. So
Yeah. I mean, by the end, she's like, I got to go to the bathroom. But I was like, just wait a second, will you? Right when they go in the silo, she's like, I got to pee. I'm like, just go in your pants, But she was on board with it, which that sounds about right. Because when you think about it, Miku was her age when War came out, and we went to the theater to see that.
Wow.
So it's I don't know. For me, obviously, I'm like all my kids have just we've gone through all of them. We've watched the original ones. It's just that's part of their DNA. That's what happens when you're my kid.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Including my oldest son, Brian Hall, who
Yep.
I remember I kind of forced you to sit through the original one probably about 20 years ago.
Yeah, but it was exciting because it was something that was a part of culture, the Statue of Liberty and everything, but I had no idea what that story was. And so I was excited to sit down and finally see it.
Well, this has just been from our conversations the last few weeks. I'm like super excited for whenever we get to talk through the next one of the classic movies, because I expect that'll be a fun conversation to have.
Oh man, yeah, I can't wait. I don't even know what it's about, so it'll be a surprise.
Interesting. Well, that's how I feel about the next one of these. I have no idea what it's going to be about, and that's exciting to me.
Man, I'm so glad. I said it already, but I'm just so relieved that it was good, but that especially that you thought it was good.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm sitting here. I'm just waiting for the announcement for the next one, which I'm sure will be coming shortly.
Yeah,
and then the wait begins. Although I feel like we're going to run out of titles pretty soon.
Right.
That was the one thought I had. I was like, how many of the On the Planet of the Apes things can we do before?
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
because that's the thing is these trilogies, like unless you know what goes with what, they're all just going to blur together.
That is a bit of trouble with the naming conventions. I have to admit, with the previous trilogy, I kind of remember that War is the last one, but I'm like, Rise, Dawn, those feel so similar anyway.
Yeah, most people agree Dawn comes before Rise.
Right.
Just as a matter of human behavior. But yeah, that was definitely a thought I had. I was like, because the old television show, I think I said this to you, they took episodes and cut them together into TV movies. And so those had titles like Life, Liberty, and Pursuit on the Planet of the Apes.
Oh, interesting.
And I was like, well, hopefully we don't end up there with those type of titles. But eventually we're going to run out. So that might be something they need to think about.
Yeah.
But hey, that's a conversation for another time, Brian.
Yeah. And I look forward to seeing what they figure out. So
unless the apes take over before the next movie comes out, we'll find out soon enough.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when the apes take over in the movies. But hey, let us know your thoughts if you enjoy what we had to say about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Maybe you disagree. In which case, hey, we welcome all opinions here, even wrong ones like that. You can email us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast. You can also, just say hello. You can text me. I'm not going to give you my text. I realized I was like running out of things to say about how to reach out to us.
Isn't that a thing? Or there was like an app where celebrities would sign up for something and you could text them, but it was through some
text a celebrity.
Yeah. Do you know what I'm talking about? And it wasn't their real number, but it was through some like I don't know. I don't even know what it was, but I never understood that concept. So I was like, so Ben Affleck, if he signs up on this thing, he just gets hundreds of texts throughout the day, but sometimes replies to some of them.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
I need to look this up now.
I'm very curious how that works or why anyone would sign up for that.
Is this defunct? Is this still a thing?
Let's see. I don't know. I don't have it enough information to even know what it would be called or how to look it up.
This is so weird.
I'll look into this and I'll let you know.
This is great content.
Oh,
we're
here it
putting
is.
out
Here it is. Here's how
Oh.
you can text Ashton Kutcher and Jennifer Lopez.
Oh, I think we landed on the same thing.
Oh, yeah. Stars have been giving out their phone numbers on Instagram lately. They aren't their actual digits. It's a new service called Community. It's instant and direct communication using the simplicity of text messaging. Hundreds of actors, artists, figures. Yeah, so it's launched in 2019. So yeah, like I'm seeing these old tweets, Jonas Brothers, Ashton Kutcher, and they sending out a number saying, "Yeah, text me." And
Okay.
then the article says, "So why are celebrities doing this? It's a way for them to engage with their fans." But doesn't that just sound exhausting?
It really does.
How would you even sift through that?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm glad that look, Chris Rock, Jennifer Lopez, Jonas Brothers, Lil Nas X. I mean, Mark Cuban, Post Malone, Obama.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure Obama's going to get right on it. Texting you back.
Yeah. Like, at what point in his day is he going to open up this app and be like, "All right,
Yeah.
let's look through these 9,000 things and see if there's anything worth replying to"? I wonder if it's still. Anyway,
All right.
I can't believe we went down this, but if you're still here with us, God bless. Thank you.
And we'll catch you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Movie Film Podcast.